Hey everybody, it's Justin from Built, and today we're going to do a CNC beginner video. When I first got my CNC machine, I watched a ton of videos before I actually purchased it and got it in and stuff. And really, there was not that video out there that I found. I'm sure there are, but I didn't find the video for me that really made it click, if that makes sense. There were lots of technical videos of people who knew so much about CNC machines out there, but nothing that was really like holding my hand, this is the dead set beginner thing. And for me, it took a couple days to learn my CNC. Now that I've learned it and I'm making lots of stuff with it over the past 2 years, I find that when I have conversations with people, there's lots of hesitation because of software and stuff. And it's really easy. And so I wanted to make that really easy video. So what we're gonna do today is, my brother has his birthday coming up. My brother and sister Doug and Denise are twins and their birthday's coming up. And my brother's a golfer. And so he would like a hole-in-one sign for his office where when he gets that hole-in-one, he's not gonna get one. He can put this ball up on the sign permanently. Now, I want to give somebody a gift that they're actually going to use. So next to the hole-in-one slot, we're going to put a slot that says almost hole-in-one, right? Because maybe he might use that slot, more likely, right? If anything, we understand that Justin is the best golfer in the family now. So I digress. Back to the, I love my brother. Back to the sign. We're going to take this sign and I'm going to break it into that video that I wish I had found. Hopefully. I hope I can do that for you. I want to make something that's the basic elements of getting a CNC project going. And a sign, you can make beautiful signs and you'll be really surprised at how easy they are. Once you understand the setup process before it actually starts cutting, it really is easy. So let's do that. Let's learn the basics of CNC today on Built. So step one is to put your media inside the CNC machine. CNC machines can work with all sorts of products in here. Anything that a router can use, you can put in here. So woods, plastics, MDF, the range is endless, but I have in here a piece of hard maple that I'm going to turn into a sign. And it's very, very important that you clamp it down in some aspect. It would be very bad if it wasn't perfectly flat, because if it's high in one spot and low in another spot, it will affect your cut. It will dig deep in the area that it's high and it won't dig enough in the area where it's low, and it'll make your project off. Another reason to clamp it down is so once something's hitting it and moving it, if it doesn't stay put, it's going to move all over the place and it's going to look horrible. So make sure that it's firmly clamped down. Now, you can even just do that by sinking screws into it. It's all up to you in the way that you do it. I use T-Track with these disposable wooden or plastic clamp downs. The CNC machine hits them all the time. Even if I'm trying not to, there's just some movements where it's just deciding, oh, I'm gonna go over here on the way back, and it just kind of clips it and the clamp goes flying. That's why wood or plastic is good, so that it doesn't damage the machine. And of course, I make mine out of wood, so as they get ruined, I just make more with the CNC machine. Whole circle of life thing, right? I'm using a program called Easel. It's a website-based thing. I've tried many different ones, and I found this one to be very beginner-friendly and intuitive. And so this was kind of the one that I started learning on. And so I felt this would be great for this video. They do have a free trial, so it's at inventables.com. And so the very first thing we do in here is, this is our workspace, and this is where it shows you a render of what you've made. And so first thing we have to do is look at how big of a board we have. That way it will show us the space that we have to use in here. So I'm going to click this birch plywood section, and it brings up a window. Now, I'm not using birch plywood. I'm using hard maple. And it's important to select the right stuff, because it will then auto-select how the CNC machine is supposed to run based on the material that you're putting through it. Because you don't want to be You don't want it thinking that it's something very soft. In reality, it's very hard, and so it's trying to move through it very quick when it shouldn't. So that's why it's important to pick the right material type. Next, we're going to put in how big of a piece of wood we have so that we know how much space we have to work with. So I have a 24-inch by 16.5 inch wide, and then it is 3/4 inch thick, so 0.75. Now, you can change this in the setting to metric if you're one of my international friends and follow the same process. So here we go. We have a much bigger board, so much so that I have to zoom out so that I can see it all because it is big. Cool. Let's go ahead and start adding some text on here. And that might be the only thing that you end up doing on your entire sign, possibly. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to select a font, and it will put a piece of text down on the screen. And so what I'll do is just double click that and I'll type Douglas Lang. My brother and sister are half brother and sister, so they have a different last name than I do. And then I'm going to change this one to Hole in One. And then do one more. Perhaps we might make this one bold or a different font since it speaks the truth. M-O-S-T, Hole in One. Now, these are a little too big, and this one maybe is a little bit too small. So there's multiple ways you could resize some fonts in here. One way is to just grab the little corners, and you can make it by dragging. Another way is to actually put a specific size in here. So when you're doing a lot of stuff in CNC, the awesome thing is that you can measure things and be ultra precise. Now that might not be the case with this text, but with a lot of other stuff it's super important. So I might say, oh, I can only have this as 4 inches wide, let's say. So I'm going to just go over here and change it to 4 and hit enter, and it will automatically resize it so that the width is 4 inches long. Now, when I do that, there's this little lock button right next to it, meaning that I want to maintain my dimensions. I would like for this to look the same, whether it is this small or this big. If I don't lock it, and I say 4, it's going to maintain the same height. And so now you can see my word is more smushed together, which is not what I want. So I'm going to go ahead and lock it first with this little button here. And now when I say make it 4 inches wide, it's maintained its height. Now over with the Douglas Lang, I'm just going to bring that up a little bit. And, this is all just guesswork at the moment, but I wanted to just kind of give it a little something. So now that we have some text in here, I would like to make a border around each of these areas where we're going to put the golf balls. And so I'm going to make a square. And if you look over in our example area, it shows that the square is just completely cutting out everything. So if I put this over my words, now it's cutting out a bunch of my words, or my letters, with this square. Well, I don't want that. So I would like it to be more of a border. And so what we're going to do is go up to the cut button up here. And this controls all of your cut settings for this particular item, how deep you're going to cut it and how it's going to cut it. So right now it says clear out a pocket. Well, I don't want that. I would like it to be more of a cut out a path, so just the outside border. So I'm going to click that, and now you can see it is a hollow border of a square, and I'm going to turn it into a rectangle. And so now I have this area bordered in. I can always click anything at any time, just hit copy paste, and now I have a edit, copy, edit, paste. My keyboard doesn't always like to work with this sometimes. There we go. So now we got our almost hole-in-one and our hole-in-one. And they're bordered in, so that's fun. For step 3, we're going to talk about cut settings, and that's because you might notice over here that something's off, and so I want to address it early rather than you sit here and wonder about it. So in my preview window, it's not showing everything right. You see Douglas Lang and it's broken apart and you don't see hole in one, and you don't see almost hole in one. So that is weird. Why isn't it showing me that stuff? And that really confused me when I first started using the software myself. And the reason is a CNC is a precision machine. It wants to exactly create what you design over here. If it can't do that, it will omit it because it doesn't want to screw up your project, which that's a very good thing. And the reason why it can't accomplish this is because the bit that I currently have selected is too big. So it wouldn't be able to get into those fine nooks and crannies type of thing. So right now you'll see that I have a 1/8 inch bit selected. So if I click on this and I say give me a 1/16 inch bit instead, and you go back, now Douglas Lang is cut very nice and complete. Hole in one is partially here and almost hole in one is starting to appear. But again, we don't have a small enough bit to adequately do both of those. For most consumer grade CNCs, 1/16 is really going to be the smallest you can get. I've bought smaller bits, but they just snap right away. So for me, if I need to get anything more detailed, a 60-degree V-bit is a great option. And I'll hold one of these up. It is a triangular shaped bit. And because it goes to an incredibly fine point, you can get incredibly fine detail with this. So what we're going to do is switch it over to a 60-degree bit. And we're going to use that for the rest of this project, I think. And so now you see that everything is visible here. Now everything has been changed so that it will reflect using this bit to cut it. So you'll see how this valley is no longer square, it's kind of in a triangular shape. Same with these words here, but it does create a cool visual for this type of stuff. So now we've achieved our precision cutting. Now let's talk about depth of cut. Every single thing on here can be cut at a different depth if you would like. And the way that you tweak your depth in the cut is by going to this cut tab and selecting something. So let's select Doug Lang, and right now it tells me that it's cutting at about 1/4 inch in depth. If I slide this down, it's going to cut it deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. And if I slide it all the way to 3/4 inch, which is the thickness of our wood, it will go white, which means it's cutting all the way through and you can see what's on the other side of the wood. I don't want to cut that all the way through, I want to engrave it. So I think I'm going to put it at about 1/4 inch. Now this slider obviously is not precise, so you can go to this little numerical keypad here and I can say 0.25, and now we are exactly at 1/4 inch of depth. So it's nice that you have some generic stuff and you also have very precision stuff in with this. Now I can do that to everything else. If I do that for my borders right here, if I make it thinner, you'll notice that it got, well, okay. If I make the cut less deep, so shallower, you'll also notice that this got much, much, much thinner. And the reason behind that is we're using that triangular V-bit. And I'm going to hold it up again just to really give you a description, visual. So if I'm carving thin, shallow, then only a little bit of the bit needs to go in. But the deeper I need to cut, the more of this triangle needs to go in, making my cut wider and wider and wider and wider. So with this, if I'm just going to scratch the surface of it, it can be very thin. But the computer knows, since I'm using a triangle to dig this groove, the deeper I make it, the thicker it gets, up until, if it's going to cut all the way through, that is really the complete width of that bit. So if I take this back to, maybe it's going to only be 1/8 for both of these, then great. Or you know what, I'd like to make it precise, so I'm going to go 0.125. And same with this one, I'm going to say make it 0.125. So now it's not crazy deep. It didn't widen it a lot, and the whole idea was just to score a little bit of an area so that you see, hey, this is where the golf ball goes. For the next step, I want to show you something that's super useful that can really elevate a lot of your work, and that is to import an image into your CNC work. And so to do that, we go over to this button that says Import, and I'm going to go all the way down to Image Trace. And what that allows you to do is it brings up this window and you can upload a file. So we're going to do that. Now, the file that you want to upload, you want it to be black and white. And I'm going to show you what happens when you don't do that. Here's a picture of my wife and I, and it's in color, and I'm going to upload it, and you're going to see what it looks like. Not so hot, right? It doesn't really know how to translate this very well. And you can play with the threshold and smoothing and stuff, and you can try tracing outlines and things, but in reality, this is not a great option. So I'm going to close it, and I'm going to import another one. And for this golf thing, I have a free vector file that I found on the internet. Always make sure you either have a subscription to somebody or you get some of the free stuff that's out there. Vector stuff you can find free because it's very not high level content, if you want to think about it that way. So here's a golf guy. So I can just hit import, and boom, I got a golf guy. And I can scale him up. Looking good. All right. And, you know, he seems a lot darker than the rest of this, so I'm going to go to the cut and make sure that he's at around the same cut depth as the other stuff, about 1/4. And looks good. Now, let's play around just because this is a cool function. I'm going to go back to Image Trace, and I found another free file. And that free file was, oh, this cool looking wolf guy. So we put the wolf in, and we hit import, and boom, you got this awesome wolf. That was a free vector file on a service. Look at that. That is really cool. And I wanted to just show you this one because this one had a lot more contrast to it than just this silhouette of a golf guy. And so you can really produce some really cool stuff with this. Whoops, we got rid of his nose. Now, an interesting thing with that, and you'll notice that just happened. It will actually put different parts of the photo as different pieces, depending on how complex it is. So with this one, if you notice, all of this stuff is attached as one solid line. Let's say you could make this without any gaps, so they made it one piece. But the nose was floating out in nowhere, so they made it a separate selectable item. So that can come into play in a really good way when you're importing some stuff. Sometimes there's things, you know, maybe it's this picture of the wolf and there was other stuff in the image. That stuff will be separate, so you can always click it and delete that type of stuff if you don't want it. So there's a lot of ways to play around with it, but again, we're doing this as a basics video, so I'm not going to go too much into all that stuff. I just wanted to show you it's a really cool way to be able to bring in some imagery into your work. And so as long as it's a grayscale or black and white photo, when you import it, it will produce very well on your CNC machine. The next step in our process is adding specific size design items, and that is one of the most phenomenal things that a CNC machine can do. I'm able to measure things and recreate them on here. I'm able to specifically put a hole in really exactly where it needs to go so that it'll fit in a peg on something that I'm building. There's so many different ways of being able to make sure that this goes exactly where it needs to be. And a big help to that is a pair of digital calipers. Now, you don't need expensive ones. The like 6-inch ones are sold everywhere from Harbor Freight to all over Amazon. This is a 12-inch one, and I really like this one for me just because I like to measure things before I put them into the CNC machine. So a bigger one makes me able to measure bigger stuff. So my golf ball, I put it in here. I measure it. It's 1.682 inches. And so what I'm going to just do is add a placeholder in here with a circle. And over on the area of size, I can say 1.682 inches. Now notice it made it an oval because I only did it for the width. I should need to do that for the other side too, 1.682 inches, and now it's back to a circle again. I could have done that in one move if I had just clicked this lock button. So whenever you change one thing, it changes the other as well. So I'll actually do that just to show you one more time over on the other one. So I'll lock it first, and then I'll say 1.682, and it changed both at the same time. Now, it's interesting, the size and scale of your product might get away from you sometimes. And as I'm looking at this right now, man, this golf ball is really dinky on this sign. And I think I might actually even scale everything down a little bit and not use the entirety of this board in this case because it's just going to be too big, I think. The golf ball is going to look so small. So I'm going to keep playing around with it right now. I'm going to add a couple other design elements because I am making this for my brother, but it's more than what I want to show in a beginner video. So let's kind of fast forward ahead a little bit. Okay, so I think I'm pretty much done with my design. I did realize that I'm just making this sign way too big, especially in contrast to the size of the golf ball that's going to be on there. So I shrunk everything down a little bit to a more appropriate size for this sign. Now, what I'm going to show you right now, I debated leaving out, but you know what? It's a really simple, very helpful trick. And so this is obviously optional in your sign design here, but I made a frame that's going to just be slightly engraved around my sign here. And everything has squared corners, but I want a rounded corner like this. And it's very easy to do. So I'm going to zoom down on this other corner, just so I can make sure I'm being precise with everything I'm doing. And when I select the frame, there's a thing called edit points. So if I click that, you can add as many points, see these white dots? You can add as many points anywhere you want to manipulate the shape. And so for this corner, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a dot see how there's like a grid here? I'm going to count 7. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And put a point. And now I'm going to go from here. I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and put a point here. So now I have all these extra points. Well, I don't want the point at the corner anymore because it's making it pointy. But now we have this diagonal line, which, P.S., this is a good way for making diagonal lines. Now, right next to it, it's asking me, well, do you want this to be straight or do you want it to be curved? And I want it to be curved. So now you see there's a slight curve in here. If I grab this little line and I drag it down to where it meets my other line, you see how all of a sudden there's these 2 red lines that appear? It's saying that you have perfectly curved your corner. And that's it. I now have a curved corner. So I'm just going to recreate that process on each one of these corners, and it'll be rounded just like this over here. The last thing we're going to do is cutting out something. And, you know, I've resized this sign on this big piece of wood, and the sign is just a lot smaller than the piece of wood. So I'm going to cut it out of the wood. What I'm going to do is I'm going to grab it and drag it over a little bit so that it's not so close to the edge. And I'm going to copy this line that I want to keep, but I kind of want to emulate its shape now. So I'm going to move it over to the side, and I'm going to size it out. And I'll get detailed on this on my own. I don't want to waste your time. But so here we go. It looks pretty good. Now I'm going to select this line, and I want to cut it all the way through. We do have a problem, though. We only have a 60-degree bit set right now. And that is not what we would want to use to cut something. You wouldn't want to cut all the way through this wood with a triangle. You'd want to just use something straight to cut through. So one option is to add an additional bit. Now, when you're using a V-bit, it always wants to make the V-bit a detail bit. So something that only does your fine detail work. So we've done that. So it moved it and it labeled it detail bit. Now for our other bit, yeah, 1/8 bit is good. I like it. So when I come over here and I select that I would like to cut all the way through, and I drag that slider, hey, now we have white all the way through here. Awesome. But it made that line really, really thick, saying that it is the using the V bit, which I don't know why it did that. That is not what I want it to do. I want it to be this bit right here. So since that is the case, I'm going to use this to show you some other fun trick. And I know there's a way to fix this, but I'm just going to show you a different trick real quick. We're back to just having a 60-degree V-bit here. Down at the bottom, we have this plus button. And so this is an area where you can differentiate your cuts if you want to. So maybe you have a very complicated project that requires many different bits to use as you go through the project. Maybe it's something that you want to break up into different pieces. There's a lot of different reasons for using it, but it's very handy. And so what I'm going to do is go to this little V in the corner and say duplicate my project. So now I literally have two of the exact same projects. I always keep the first one as like my master, and this is where I would make any changes, and then I would duplicate things down the line, because if I start moving things around, it's going to create problems. But if I'm just using this to break out certain items into different actions that I'd like to do, then this works very good. So I'm going to keep this one original. I'm not going to mess with it. I'm going to make another duplication. So I have three of these now. I like to keep this one clean, let's call it, unaltered. So I'm going to go to the first one, and the first one's going to be my 60-degree V-bit stuff. So pretty much that is everything in here except for this outer circle, rectangle. So I'm going to just delete it. So now this layer is cutting everything or engraving everything with a 60-degree bit. When I go to this other one, I'm going to call this one my 1/8 straight bit layer. And I'm going to get rid of everything in here that isn't a 1/8 straight cut. Of course, it wants to select the outer circle too. Deselect it. Okay. Delete. Okay. So as you click back and forth, you'll notice that this one is the outer cut and this is the engraving. So we've just broken them out into kind of different projects, but it's the same piece of wood. It's in the exact same spot where it's supposed to be, and we've just broken it out into two different projects almost. So the first one I'll do is I'll engrave this piece of wood in this one, and then when that's all done, I'll click this one and change out the bit to the 1/8, and I will cut out my piece of wood. So that is it for this project's design phase. Let's go ahead and see how I'm going to actually cut this out. Okay, let's do the final steps and get this thing actually running. This was something that was part of the confusion for me, and so this is probably the most important part of the video, because whatever you design on there, these next steps are always the same. And so once you understand these steps, it becomes using this machine very easy. Lots of trial and error, but you know, it'll be easy from this point. So the first thing I'm going to do is go on the computer and I'm going to click Carve up in the corner. And it asks me to make sure, hey, is your material actually 0.75 inch thick? And yeah, it is. And then do you have it clamped down? Yes, it is. I have it clamped down. It's secure. Do you have a 60-degree V-bit in there? And the answer is no. No, I do not right now. So what I'm going to do for my first step in setting everything up is I'm going to bring my CNC machine to the front left corner of this piece of wood. So let's bring it up here. I'm using the jog settings to move the machine right now. Now it's very important that you don't move your machine too far forward to where this collides with this. That would be bad. It can misalign your unit. And so the way I have my machine set up is, and this is a personal thing, but it's the way I do it, is I have these stop blocks on the sides of the left and the front. And these are actually sitting inside of the cut area that my machine is capable of. So I've actually reduced the size of something that I can cut. But I did this because I wanted to make sure that I was perfectly square when I put a piece of wood in here. Now, this piece of wood that I put in actually isn't square, but that's okay because I'm cutting it out of the middle of the wood. If I'm doing something where that piece of wood isn't getting cut out, I make sure that I'm perfectly square on both of these things. Now, by also bringing my guides inside, as long as I'm paying attention to what I'm doing, I'm not going to ram this into here. I'm actually going to be a little bit off of it. And so I like doing it that way. Right now, I need to change my bit out. And I have a very large bit in from a previous project I was doing. And so I'm going to raise my machine up, and I'm going to take off my bit. And my Makita router has a locking button here, so I just make sure that I'm locked in, and I use my wrench to loosen it up and take out my bit. So I'm going to remove the bit, put it back where it goes in my holder, and I have my V-bit. And a V-bit, or a very small precise bit, is actually great because when I lower this back down, I will have a very precise gauge of what is the front left corner of my unit. So now that I have that bit in, I'm going to lower my bit down slowly. I'm going to change the speed, well, slower, let's say. I'm going to get it really close to the wood, and I'm going to look at it from all angles and say, oh, it's a little over to the side right now. So I'm going to make small movements and get that bit directly over the top of that wood. And it's not that important on this one for me, but I wanted to show you this is how I do it every time. That way the computer knows this is the very corner of this unit. So we've given it the X and Y values by putting it at the very corner. I'm then going to go ahead and bring that bit back up a little bit because we're going to have to do the next step, which is using a probe to set the thickness, or for the computer to understand the height of the wood. So on the computer, I confirm, yes, I have now put the correct bit in. And it's asking me, hey, how are you going to tell me what the vertical is on this project? And I'm going to use a probe. You can do it from manual, but I like using the probe option. And so my probe is this block of aluminum that came with my machine and a magnet. And so you stick the magnet on the nut up here that's holding the collet. And I place my block here and I hold it down. So this is flat on the product. Now, I can also flip it over because you can see how it's indented. I could sit it on here as well. Both work. On the machine, before I initiate this, I have to touch the block to the bit so that it knows that it works. So basically what we're doing is we're sending an electrical current through the metal, and then when it touches the metal again, it makes a circuit, and the computer's like, whoa, stop, don't move the machine anymore. So since I've tested it and it sees that contact, I can then say, go ahead and test. So I'm going to go ahead and click touch plate is in place, start probing, and it will move down, and as soon as it touches the metal, it will go back up. Okay, that was not a good probe because it moved on me. So I'm actually going to go back and probe again. That does not happen often, but I want to make sure I'm showing you the right thing. Somebody would see that and say, whoa, Justin, what's going on? So I'm actually going to hold this right here very firmly. See? Okay, now we have a good accurate reading. So the whole use of the probe is done at this point. It can go away. Now the computer knows the X, the Y, and the Z, which is up and down for this unit. I know it's raised it up a lot right now, but that's okay. It raised it up because it doesn't want to hit anything. This is its starting position. I'm now going to go ahead and put my dust collector cover on it. And we're set to go from this point. My machine is now saying, do you have it in the left in the left bottom corner? And yes, I do. I did that a few steps before. When you're moving around the machine, you might as well just always go there in the first place. Is the dust shoe attached? Yes. Confirm that it's attached? Yes. And is your spindle on? So on my machine, for my steps, sorry for the camera shake. All right, so when I get to this phase, I always close my lid first because who knows what can fly out at you. I don't want anything flying out at me. And I'm gonna go over and I'm gonna turn on my router and I'm gonna turn on my vacuum. And then we hit carve. So the engraving cut is done. It only took 29 minutes and it did cause a problem. And I'm a big fan of showing you guys when I have a problem and what I do to fix it. So, because it happens a lot, right? If you'll notice, I'm zooming in here, my golfer has a raggedy edge right there. And over there, and over there. And honestly, I think it's because I had it set too aggressively. The machine was really cutting through this hard maple very fast and moving very fast, and I think it was just set too fast. So when it was finishing up those cuts, maybe it was kind of getting deflected a little bit. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to run it again, but I'm only going to run this part. I'm not going to run any of the other stuff because the other stuff looks great. There's no issues with it. What I'm going to do is just copy this golfer onto another one of those little layer pages down at the bottom, and I'm going to slow down how fast my bit is moving and have it just redo that again. And most of the time it's just going to be cutting in thin air. It's not even going to be touching the wood, but eventually when it gets down to the bottom, it is going to hopefully clean that up. And to that point, I'm not touching the router, I'm not moving it, I'm not taking the wood out, I'm not doing anything. I want it to stay exactly where it is, because I'm just going to tell the computer to run it again from exactly where it was before. That way it's hitting the exact same spot on my wood. So we just did the troubleshoot recut, and as you can see, it is way better than it was. It's not 1000% perfect, but you know, I think it's as good as we're going to get it, and then we're just going to sand it to make it look much better. Since our engraving pass is finished, now it's time to reset it for our cutout path where we're going to use our straight bit. So what I will end up doing is moving the router up, grabbing my wrench, locking it down, and loosening the arbor nut. Okay. Take my V-bit out, and now I need to put in a 1/8 bit. Now this guy is very small, so you either have to completely change out the entire collet, which means taking this guy out that has this size hole and putting this one in, which is what is preferred, or you can use a collet adapter where you slide this small bit into this one and then push it in. But personally, I like just changing out the entire arbor nut. And when I do, I always try to clean out in here a little bit, because failure to do so in the long run is going to be bad. Just a good blow will do it most of the time. There's so much sawdust and everything in here. It's good to vacuum out up here a lot. It's good to take a lot of cleaning precautions because it will maintain the life of your tool. We're going to make sure we're still located on the corners, so we're going to bring it down a little bit, take a look. Yes, we didn't move the machine, so the machine is still perfectly in the corner. I'm going to go ahead, since I have a completely new bit in here, I will probe again. So in the computer, I selected my cutout path. It asks me, did I switch it over to a straight bit? I did, and we're going to probe. Got to make sure that it knows its position. It does. Go ahead. Great. This probing process. It's very simple. It's very straightforward. Once you've done it a couple times, it really makes things very comfortable for you to say, okay, I know where I'm at. I know that I fit it in the right X, Y, and Z axis, and it's going to produce the product that you want. You could have this board way out here if you wanted to, and you could bring it out, but what you do need to make sure is that it is perfectly square wherever it is, and because if it's not, you're going to carve crooked into the wood. So that's always why I like just starting in the corner and making sure that I have these guides here, just so I know that I'm always straight and square. All right, let's get cutting and it'll be all done. We are all cut out and almost done. The CNC work is done and the me work begins because I have to sand this, stain it, and do a couple other little things to it. I actually think I'm gonna add epoxy to this one too, and I'm gonna put that in a different video because this is the basics of CNC, not epoxy work. And of course, I hope my brother someday will get to use this. One can dream, right, Doug? One can dream. But happy birthday to my brother and sister. My sister doesn't like golf, so I'm gonna make something else for her. I hope this was a decent beginner video for you. I really omitted a lot of stuff. I really tried to just keep on the core basics. And hopefully you might be able to follow along with some of this and obviously change it around for whatever type of sign you want to make. But, you know, get through that process. Once you've built something and you've hit go and it makes it, you're there. Now you can, the world's your oyster. You can go in there and just design whatever you want and hit go, and it's actually gonna move and cut out the things that you want. There's a million things to learn, but it's really easy once you kind of get the core functionality of here's how I set up my machine and put it and go. Then you can start playing around with making complicated stuff. There's amazing things that a CNC can make. That CNC is probably the most expensive thing in my shop. And I have zero regrets in spending that money. It has brought a lot of functionality and really cool stuff to the things that I've been able to build. So I've been very happy with it. We are 2 months old. I'm hoping to hit 10,000 subscribers this month. So if you haven't liked and subscribed and you like what you saw today, I hope you'll consider doing that. It'll definitely help me out quite a bit. And of course, stay safe in the shop. I'll see you in the next video.